Right. So our topic tonight is who we really are, is where the healing lies, but who we have become blocks it. Now, this may not be news to many of you. And there's a really good chance that tonight you're not going to hear anything that you haven't heard before. But here's the but, okay? I don't know, those of you who've been with us from the beginning, somewhere in one of the first sessions, we said, please, I think it was Antoinette came up with this, please bring new ears to what you're listening to. Because whenever you bring new ears, fresh ears, I think may be the word, right? When you bring fresh ears to something that you think you already know, you have the opportunity to get it on a completely different level. And the ego, and I've noticed this so much, and just today I got confirmation of it again with a client. I was telling Antoinette before we started, a client that I've been working with for a long time, and he's so stressed today, like so stressed, right? And he's telling me all the thousand reasons why he's freaking out. And I said to him, so when was the last time that you connected to with your vision? And he had all the reasons why he can't work on his business right now because, I mean, they were all very valid. And I said, so what if the work is just connecting to your vision? When was the last time you reminded yourself of the choice that you have for your business, the
Mhm.
end in mind? And he was like, he actually blushed. He went, "Oof, it's been a long time. I've actually forgotten." And the reason
Wow.
why he said that is not because he's a bad client, but because that is one of the biggest strategies that the ego uses. So one of the two that I've noticed is, I already know this. I know this. And then whatever you hear, you try and fit into the framework of how you already know it. And more than that is often, well, I know like a deeper than this, all right? Because sometimes when it's too simple, we're like, yeah, I've got all that. It's like, I've got that. That's like level one, right? That is sometimes a strategy of the ego to keep us out of the truth, to keep us where we are so that we don't actually evolve, step out of our safety zone. And the second one is forgetting. Forgetting is it's not because you, I don't know, menopause has got giving you brain fog or whatever. It can. I mean, the brain fog doesn't help, right? But we forget to do the things that we know actually work or move the needle forward, or we forget that we can just stop and take a breath, or we forget that we can stop and say a prayer, or we forget, like my client, that, when you're completely overwhelmed, one of the ways you can counter the overwhelm is to connect to what is it that you really love. So I already know this, and forgetting it are two of the ego strategies to stop you from getting the benefit of what it is that you can from something that you think you might know. And this is why we have put this, and largely Antoinette has put this together. I will not lie. Let me give the credit where it's due. Antoinette has put this together largely, all right? This is mostly her work. And it's an overview. It's an overview of who we really are as we're healing lives. Yes, we maybe all know that, but who we've become blocks it. We probably know that too. And so we ask you to come with fresh ears tonight because maybe there's just one thing on one slide that reminds you, or that takes you deeper, or that is your next intuitive step in the direction of your healing. You can never hear this stuff enough. So, having said that, I'm going to hand over to Antoinette.
Thanks, Loretta. Can everybody hear me? Because I do sometimes have problems with my mic. It's
I can
good.
hear you.
Okay. Loretta, another ego strategy you mentioned before is when we know something, we think we're doing it and living it.
Yes.
And I want to just add on to what you've said as well is that I've tried in this presentation to frame it in a way. It's not an easy thing to do because it's quite a lot, but to frame it in a way that gives a perspective and maybe pulls in some of the nuances and stuff and shows a bit of the whole picture. Um, so let's see how it goes. Um, Everybody knows my story, and I just want to say one sentence so that you know where this comes from. Nearly 10 years ago, I had that stage 4 very aggressive cancer on a very healthy lifestyle. And honestly, when I started realizing where I could help myself heal, which was with the psychoneuroimmunology stuff that came my way, I started revisiting information that I already knew from a completely different perspective and
Mm.
gaining new information and new perspectives and diving deeper into it and starting to practice it. So I had no idea until I knew how much I didn't know. And I didn't know I didn't know it. And I had been on a spiritual and self help path for 30 years. I think people have heard me say I was deeply embedded in it. So I knew a lot of this stuff, but I didn't see the full picture. And I certainly wasn't living it. So I think we also depends when we hear what. Hey, I'm busy
Mm.
listening to one of Richard Raw's books for the eighth time, and I've heard things in it now I never heard on time seven. So yeah,
Mm.
just bring your curiosity and just be with it and see what lands and what doesn't.
Okay.
So some of this we have been through before. So if we want to become the best version of ourselves, as we've said before, it's to remove the obstacles that prevent God from taking effect in our soul. I mean, you can say that in many different ways. You can use many different types of divine language. We don't come from a specific spiritual tradition, but I just tend to use words that resonate with me. So, what does this actually mean, though? It means we start to stop functioning in patterns that we have not consciously chosen. That actually is the psycho-spiritual journey to higher self, is to let go of the blockages so that we can become in alignment with our divine self. We can reunite with it because we're born that way and that's who we really are. We all know that stuff, but we end up functioning in patterns, with coping mechanisms, with thought strategies, with distorted beliefs that we really actually don't even know, aren't aware of, because they're so buried, or there's just a reason they have not yet come to the fore and changed. So every time, this journey is about making different choices over and over again beyond our conditioned behavior, so that we can get a step closer to our true divine nature. So this I only recently found this information, and I thought it was absolutely, it blew my mind, to be honest. And it comes from Price Pritchard, who, this is real stuff if it comes from him. He's a very highly trained scientific type person, but also integrates it with a lot of the alternative stuff and all that. So he said 70% of negative thinking goes unaware in us. So many of us think we are positive, but if you look at the signs of negative thinking below, complaining, criticizing, concern or worry, commiserating, and catastrophizing, those are the signs that you're actually a negative thinker, even though you may think you're not. And actually, I've had to look at all of those, and I still am in my life. I got quite a shock when I saw this. So this I thought was just interesting because it also speaks to the fact that on a brain level, the brain, not the heart brain, we can think, oh no, we are positive. We're doing positive affirmations. We have our vision. We have our focus is creating our reality. We're doing some practices, but still our minds are so often looping around in these things, catastrophizing. Yeah, so it's a good thing just to consider,
Can I
actually.
just say one thing here? Sorry, oh bugger, now I've pushed the button. What was really fascinating to me about this was the commiserating one. Because commiserating to me sounds like, let's say Antoinette is having a bad day, because I don't know, someone was really mean to her. And commiserating is, oh, yes, I feel so sorry for you. Oh, you're so right, these, I don't know, the forces that are against you are so against you. And I think very often commiserating is a sort of a form of sympathizing, and that's often considered to be a positive thing or like a kind thing, okay? so that one for me was like a interesting, all right, on the commiserating one.
I think maybe it's one of those two-sided coins, Loretta, we always talk
Definitely.
about, because there is a big place for empathy and understanding and meeting someone where their traumas are at and maybe sharing a bit of yours. But I think we can end up doing a lot of wound sharing, and there's a
Mm,
delicate balance. And I think commiserating towards ourselves. I've had to rewire something in me that I still work with every day, where I tend to go into a kind of self pity, a commiseration with
mm.
myself.
Oh,
Oh, poor
interesting.
you, here you
Mm,
are again.
mm,
And it's so deeply ingrained with me that as an automatic behavior, I've honestly, it shocked me actually. And that's actually the very reason my pancreas is not okay, the kinesiologist says. So I am a lot in gratitude, I think. I'm a lot in like, I go forward, I don't get stuck in things, but
mm.
I've had to look at some really real stuff that's underpinning or is together there with that. And the mind will always show you that what is it that you think, you know.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
it's quite interesting, yeah.
Right.
So we're coming back to this, and this is absolute grade one, Simon. Sorry for someone like you. Someone on our group is actually properly trained and educated in neuropsychology and neuroscience and PNI and stuff. I'm not. I've just done a gazillion hours of research over the last 9 years. So this is something I knew. I knew long before I got cancer. But when I was seeking for where my healing lay, I came across a Bruce Lipton clip, and this came from him. And it's out there, you know, this is neuroscience, neuropsychology, that only 10% of what's going on within us as a human being is visible and is known to us. The rest is submerged, it's unconscious, and that's 90%. Some of them are saying 95%. So these are the deeper unconscious, unknown, unseen drivers of our behavior, and we do not know them until we start bringing them forth and we know them and we integrate them. So I had seen this, but honestly, I didn't really get it. And when I saw it, about 2 months into my cancer diagnosis, I was like, actually, what I need to do is reprogram this program. Because psychoneuroimmunology talked about how suppressed emotions, toxic coping mechanisms, and stuff were really making people sick, and that maybe 80% of illness came from people's thought life. So I was like, okay, I need to look at what's going on underneath the iceberg there. And honestly, I had no idea until it started revealing itself. So we only have a fragment of our ideas and feelings are conscious to us until they start coming forth from the unconscious. And the bulk of our mental content is invisible. That's quite something.
Mm,
Really, really embed that knowledge, because it might make you a little bit nervous, but it's helpful. So I just, for because you're going to get the slides and stuff. The thing is, and we've said this before as well quite often, by the age of 7 years old, we actually have a program in place. And that program, it's a wiring in our brain. It comes about as a result of our childhood upbringing, in utero as well, which Simone's been studying quite a lot. So even pre-birth, our upbringing, our socialization, our conditioning, and if we have trauma, yeah, even more gets lumped in there. So this is the 90% that we are not aware of that's running our show. So we're actually acting like 7-year-olds until, no matter how adult we are, until we start reprogramming this program. And that means actually rewiring our brains. So the unknown is running our lives, and the stuff we're not consciously aware of. And honestly, I had no idea. I was shocked, because I was a highly successful person on a health path, spiritual. I mean, I was amazing, in inverted commas. But when I started unraveling stuff, I had so many distorted beliefs, toxic thoughts, unhealthy coping strategies, which were disguised as very healthy ones, a lot of them. Unknown stress, and that's one of the biggest factors in illness, is this unknown stress. I had triggers going off left, right, and center I had no idea about. I was suppressing my emotions, and I didn't find that all out in a week, but that all started unfolding. Um, yeah, and deeply ingrained limiting beliefs were underpinning my success, all this education I had, all the stuff I was doing in the world. So I started working on reprogramming my program. Oh, by the age of 6, Uta says the child's brain has developed 85%, and it's very absorbent. Thank you for that. So the neuro people, the neuroscientists are saying that every memory gets stored in our brain and every experience.
Mm.
So it's quite sobering, this. So we operate from this conscious mind. We operate from the conscious mind, well, less than 5% of the day. Unless the unconscious mind has the same programming as the conscious mind, the power of positive thinking is not going to work. And that's why people like me did years and years and years of affirmations, gratitude journals. I traveled all over the world seeking meaning and purpose. I did many things, and I still do all those things, but I actually internally got more low-level anxiety and high-level anxiety, and more just uneasy. I just didn't know what was wrong with my life, because I didn't know that all this power of positive thinking and everything that I was doing was not actually going to work with reprogramming my unconscious. So, yeah, this is very basic stuff, but I'm just reminding all of us, including myself. So we therefore have two parts to ourselves. We are born, to use Dr. Lisa Rankin's language, when I first started looking at this stuff years ago. We're born as a spark of God. You know, we are a part of that quantum divine light. And that is who we really are, our authentic self, our conscious awareness, our higher self, true self, divine self, lots of different names for it. The thing is, though, that spark, she says, it's very simplistic language, but it worked for me. That spark gets covered by, like Utta's saying, 85% of the brain is absorbed, all these memories from childhood and all this conditioning and socialization and parenting, even if it's good parenting. Loretta and I have talked about that a lot, and I'll put a podcast episode link on the group tomorrow if you're interested to find out more. So this small self, or people are calling it the false self or the conditioned self, which actually is our ego, starts running our show. And it doesn't deliberately try and take us away from being that magnificent spark of God that we really are. It just starts creating strategies and coping mechanisms to keep us safe and keep us loved. Because, yeah, so we'll carry on. I don't want to say too much more than that now. So just to dive a little bit deeper into the conditioned self. So this is just the part of us which is the main driver of everything until we start reuniting and integrating with who we really are. It's the self that learns and repeats patterns, behaviors, and beliefs. And it's fear and survival based, because that's how the human brain is designed. The human brain was designed so that if they had to go and hunt food in the olden days, the brain needs to go into survival mode when we're in serious trouble, even in our modern age. We need that survival instinct. But our life for a very, very long time, Caroline May says maybe 100 years, has become so fear and survival based over just everyday things. We are no longer hunting bucks to feed our family. And we need this when we're in big trauma, like a car accident or, I don't know, a war. But unfortunately, it's driving us all the time. And it's underpinned by this need we have as children to be loved, of course, and accepted. And so we start identifying with values to gain love. So depending what kind of parent you had, you might have to learn all kinds of strategies to not be in trouble or to be more loved or to gain approval. And these are usually not very positive coping mechanisms that we end up just taking into our adulthood. So in comes the ego, and the ego can get such a bad rap in the self-help world. And actually, the ego, it is a bit of it's strong and it doesn't like change, and it would die rather than have us change. But actually, it's because it sees its job is to protect us from our reality. And so it creates an identity for us to cope with any potential confusion, disconnection, loss of love that was experienced as a child. Does that make sense? We can ask questions maybe a bit later. And then the authentic self, just to dive into that a bit more, yeah, it's the part who we really are, our true divine nature. The part that is the part of us that's the witness. That's why we often see from spiritual traditions and self-help memes, we become equanimous, we're the witness to ourselves. But actually, that's not quite as simple as it's made out. But this is the part of us that can look at ourselves, that can think about what we're thinking, can watch ourselves having this human experience. And when we start integrating the unconscious self and the ego with the self, we really do start living from a place where we are more spontaneous. Life flows towards us. Miracles honestly become everyday order. We become more creative orientated. We start living our soul's purpose and destiny. And we honestly can access unspeakable peace and joy. The interesting thing is, though, that the more we move into that space, the more our ego gets very scared. Okay, gets very scared, and it starts creating havoc sometimes. So I think that slide's coming later. The bottom line here, though, is if you want to become as integrated with your higher self as possible and enlightened, or whatever the word you use, our job is to do surgery on our false self. So that we stop living this life where the ego makes all the choices and creates fear-based stories based on our past. And we don't even know it till we know it. So I'm repeating this a lot. But so we go through life, all of us. So don't think, oh my gosh, am I really doing that? We go through life with coping mechanisms, emotional internal patterns that play out. We find ourselves operating and reacting in certain ways until we become aware of all this. We don't even know that things could be different. We're just having a bad life, or things have got worse, or we all know the kind of stuff that goes on. So I just listed some examples here of how this can actually play out in your daily life, because there's many examples. We create for ourselves, and this is very strong in us humans, the illusion that our opinions and our beliefs are actually who we are. Our whole existence, and we may not know this till we really see it, is actually underpinned by a competitiveness and a deep scarcity mentality. You're going to go, oh, rubbish, that's not how I live. But it's on a very brain level that's you'll start seeing when you start observing yourself, and that makes us want to be in control. We want to be in control of everything all the time, because that's when we feel a bit safe. We feel like we're driving this crazy car, and we're actually unconsciously waiting for the next crisis all the time. And the interesting thing is, I found in my life, when my life's going smoothly and going well, it's amazing how that next crisis is blah-blahing in my head over nothing, over something that's probably not going to happen. That's catastrophizing. I'm thinking about something that might happen, or something that's going to fail, or worrying about the potential dog that's starving in the rural area here. I mean, it's just like when there's real trouble, real crisis, I'm actually quite calm. But so many of us are having this looping internal crisis in our heads and living in survival mode when actually everything's pretty fine. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we does
Sorry,
that,
sorry,
Linda?
sorry. If I just interrupt you there.
Of
This
course.
is this waiting for the next crisis. I don't think that we're necessarily conscious, but it's like when things are
Yeah.
going well, it's almost like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like, oh well, I had a client who is having chemo, And so she did the Red Devil ones and she was relatively okay. And then she had the once a week one and she was really worried that she was going to have really bad side effects. And she had the first one and I said, so how did it go? And she was like, well, I don't really want to say it because I'm scared it's going to jinx it. But actually, I didn't have any side effects from this new chemo they put me on. And I think that's a good example of, so she wasn't waiting necessarily for a crisis, but it's like, it was almost too good to be true. You know, when like things are going really well, there's another language we use. We go like, oh, this is just too good to be true. I like wonder what bad thing is going to happen next, right? I think it's a very common strategy that a lot of us have. And half the time we're not actually even aware of it, you know? So sometimes we don't actually talk about the things that have happened to us that are amazing. We don't share our wins because it's like this client of mine who was like, I don't want to say it too loud because I'm scared then the
Mm.
next one will be terrible. I was like, well, you know, you don't know how the next one is going to go. You're making that up, basically. I mean, I was more diplomatic than that, but interesting. So it's not always sorry, the point I was trying to make is it's not always necessarily that we're waiting for a crisis, is that we're thinking that what's happening is too good to be true.
Yeah, and it can be very unconscious. That's
Very
why I
much.
found that shadow questionnaire very valuable because my recent Paramount shadow shocked me because I've worked with the other shadows, so they've listened. Is that this is very, very, very unconscious, okay? Um, because of my past and my trauma and all that, I have an unconscious belief system that if something's good or loving or safe or my soul's destiny, that it's just going to not work out anyway.
Mm.
So I sabotage it so that it bombs out, and then I can. I mean, this is also unconscious. I mean, it's ridiculous actually, but this is the unconscious stuff that's been running me certainly recently. And then it's going, oh, well, let me just sabotage it and ruin it because then at least I'm in control of that.
Mm.
And then because it's an apologizing failure shadow, which God, who would have ever thought I had that? But anyway, it was underpinning all the other confidence stuff and the blah blah. And it's based on the fact that somehow I just don't feel I'm worthy enough to live my soul's destiny or to have a beautiful, loving relationship or to have something very good.
Mm.
So I unconsciously bugger up
Mm.
and ruin the relationship or create some, I don't know, some kind of weird stuff that can potentially wreck it. So, and I don't even think about this practically in my head. Well, I do these days because I know the stuff, but the next thing, the whole thing's not working out, or the relation. So I mean, it's very it can be very, very hidden. This
Mm.
cat, so it
Mm.
can be very hidden. So waiting for the next crisis, you may not actually know that's happening, but I've started observing how I have unspecified anxiety when things are going well. And I question that. I've observed how I tend to self sabotage when things are going well. So I've been starting to investigate what the driver behind that is because it doesn't make any sense. And it's very based on the fact that my ego feels terrified when I'm in the God space and I'm showing up to do my soul's work because it's just too scary for it. So
Mm.
anyway, that's how deep it can go. But it's magnificent actually because when we start seeing the stuff and meeting it and working with it, it really can become the golden shadow and illuminate the best. But it's a journey. And of course, we want to be liked. Honestly, I don't think I've ever met a human being. I've met very few who don't have that,
Mm.
and even though they have it, like
Mm.
we just want to be liked, fit in, and it creates a lot of codependency that often and people pleasing, and so often we allow the opinions of others to dictate our choices. And I honestly never thought I had done that because I can be quite stubborn. I'm single. I do what I want. But I've started watching the subtle. It can be very subtle, the stuff. And I'm like, actually, I think other people's opinions do still have quite an influence on me.
Mm.
And we can feel this is very unconscious, but Dr. Nicole LaPera, the holistic psychologist, she says we consistently feel resentment when the true parts of ourselves and our true light and our true work in the world is being repressed, and we don't even know that. It's just we're out of kilter or whatever. And we have a lot of insecurity and low self worth. I mean, I think all people have low
Mhm.
self worth,
Yeah,
Loretta,
I
but
agree.
I had no
Yeah,
idea the depths of mine because it was covered up by a lot of achieving and confidence and blah, blah. Yeah. So it's fascinating, this journey. So, healing and wholeness, our journey, our spiritual journey, it's a psycho spiritual journey. They cannot be separated. The good mystical spiritual teachers, it's all based on psycho spirituality, the mystical spirituality, where that comes from 16th century Sufis, Rumis, Christian mystics, is that our wholeness lies in reprogramming this program, in bringing the unconscious forth and working with that part of ourselves, seeing it and integrating it. That, yeah, and it takes a lot of consistent practice, this. And then we start seeing that conditioned self and we start changing and functioning in different patterns, hopefully. But this means a lot of things, and we're going to come to some of the things it requires of us. But as adults, you do need to know, because all of this sounds like, well, a lot, and maybe it's hard, but the gift in all of this is, as adults, we really do have an opportunity now to heal and to start consciously choosing different behavior, because we're not those children anymore. But those children seem very real and they are unconsciously running us. So we can't just excommunicate them and get rid of them, but it's also not actually who we are. So. Yeah, I mean, everybody knows this quote from Jung. I don't know how many of you know Jung's work. So I'd sort of skated around it until about a year ago. And then I actually got a good summary of his red book. And well, that's quite hard to understand his stuff, I think, if you go deep into it. But I've started getting quite deep understanding into Carl Jung's work. And Carl Jung was a psychiatrist. I don't know if everybody probably knows him, but he very much, everything that's being put out here now in the 1920s already, I think he was around. He was talking about all this stuff. Yeah. So that unconscious stuff's going to run your show until, and you're just going to think it's life. So this is the Jungian perspective. He calls it individuation. It's quite a fancy word, but it's really just this journey, psycho-spiritual journey of integrating your shadow, your ego, and your higher ideals, your higher self, into your psyche to achieve completeness with all of it together. And the psychological scars we have, yes, he says they're wounds, but they're not flaws. They're catalysts for deep self awareness and empathic connection towards ourselves and others. And profound inner pain can become a source of wisdom and healing. And personal suffering can lead to genuine healing if we integrate our pain and lean into our heart. And our inner wounds have to be acknowledged to do this and healed for personal growth and transformation. And I know, because Simone and I have talked a lot. Simone's been deep into this journey for a long time and trained in it and works with people, and Robin and a few of us who talk. It's not a, and of course Loretta and I, it hasn't been a walk in the park always. But it is the way to go.
I think that it's like a risk reward thing, you know. The bigger the risk you're prepared to take, the bigger reward you potentially get. And so it's like when you don't, it doesn't mean you have to jump in and embrace all the scary at once. But even when you take small steps, you take micro doses of overcoming the scary, eventually that momentum builds and the momentum builds and the momentum builds, and things start changing in your life. And the more things start changing in your life and within yourself, the more motivated or inspired you are to continue on the journey. I mean, honestly, if it was all awful, none of us would be doing it. Right?
No,
And
no,
there are
no. And in
some days
fact,
when yeah, sorry, there's some days when I think to myself, oh God, it would just be easier not to know any of this stuff. Because honestly, I could just be oblivious and then I could just like,
no,
but you
no.
know what? That's not true. That's not true. That's just on days when my bandwidth is low. And sometimes the hard is hard. And sometimes you just have to take a little break from the hard. You know, sometimes I just sit back and go, you know what, my 3 year old or my 7 year old, she's definitely driving the car. We're screaming down the freeway. It's actually quite shit, but I don't actually have the resource to take over the wheel right now. So I'm just going to have to let that go for a little bit. And then sooner or later, once we restore, sometimes when we can just accept it, it enables us to
Yeah,
actually move
yeah.
on and to get back into it. So like when you go on a long car journey, don't just get in the car and drive for 15 hours. We stop, we take a few breaks, we have a picnic, we walk around the car, we stretch, we whatever, right? So sometimes we're not like always like banging away at this, but it becomes an integrated part of your life so that you can actually start flowing with it. And then, yes, there are hard bits and there are days when you actually really have to just stop the car and take a break, right? But the rewards are worth it. So, it's like if you work hard, I mean, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Um, it's like people who mine for gold. Do you know that people still mine for gold? Do you know that people still like buy gold claims and they go and sift through gold in rivers and they make like gold strikes and they get really rich? But that's really hard work and it's a big risk and you have to be determined and you have to really carry on. But you know what? If you hit the vein of gold, you are flippin' styling. So it's like there's this law in the universe that we've spoken about before, which is the law of fair exchange. You get back what you put in. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to struggle and suffer. It just means that if you're prepared to take this journey and you choose to take this journey, it's not, if you choose to take this journey and you're consistent with the journey, you will reap the rewards of the journey because the rewards of the journey are absolutely worth it.
Yeah, because it's not all about pain and suffering. And I mean, as Brene Brown said, she's reframed it very well, reframed it, and she's done the research. Is that on the other side of the uki and the hard is the joy
Mhm.
and all that other stuff we're looking for. And I think the other thing with our society and humanity for a long time now, Carolyn May says, is we've kind of bastardized hard
Mm.
and life, we just have to be okay when it's not okay. Sometimes it's tough,
Mm.
but and sometimes it's very tough when you go on this journey. But other times, for the first time in my life, in the last 2 years, I've experienced unspeakable peace, and then the next day I can be in terror. But I'm like, well, this is the journey, and can I lean into terror? Can I be okay with a bit of heart? And recently, I've been experiencing joy, and that, I know it might sound easy for people like Loretta go, joy? Oh, I'm joyful a lot. When I got cancer, the kinesiologist said all you have to do is become joyful. Well, you couldn't have asked anything harder from me. I was successful and driven and all the clever and all these other stuff, but there was no joy bouncing around. So on the other side, or together with doing this stuff, I have been able to access more peace, more joy, more yeah, more of all the good. If we want to separate things, the thing is, it's that separating where
Mm.
we make it good or bad, or this
Mhm.
is the right way or that's the wrong way. That's where it can go. It can get ooky because, anyway, let's carry on. Yeah, there's a
Sure.
lot to be said about this. So, how do we even go about this? Because it sounds like such a lot. And well, I mean, the absolute starting point, as we've said more than once, is to start taking a witness position. Just become the witness to your life, to yourself, to what you're thinking, to your habitual patterns, to every aspect of yourself, how you react without judgment, okay? And to start looking at your disowned energies, your shadows. So the parts of you may not want to or you can't see, mostly because they're not good. We've been seriously conditioned to avoid certain things and not lean into them. And there's other parts that we just don't know until we know it. I've still got stuff. Simone introduced me to internal family systems and parts theory. It's very interesting. There are exiles, those are parts of ourselves. They don't come up until we're really ready for it because they're quite hectic. And I've had one or two of those, and I'm like, what? That's in there. But they will start revealing themselves over time. But it starts with just watching your thoughts, actually, and your reactions. And we're going to go a bit more into that. So just start observing yourself, think about what you're thinking. How are you speaking? What are your habits? What are your patterns? What are your behaviors? So, and in that way, we start bringing the unconscious into conscious awareness, hopefully not too fast. So, actually, it becomes a journey of navigating and integrating the ego and the soul self. There's no rush, it doesn't have to be perfect, and we can only go one step at a time. And one of the things about the ego, people like Richard Rohr say the ego, honestly, the ego, when we start getting grace in our life and miracles, apparently the ego, and this is all unconscious, actually even feels shame automatically. This is a scary space for our ego. So we have to have a whole lot of compassion for it and how it plays out. So yeah, we've got to surface what's hidden, full stop. Spot the unconscious coping patterns and triggers. Understand how the past shapes our present, not to get stuck in it or live in that story or trauma, but to understand how it's informed our current life. And at some point, to get to the root cause of things. You don't do this all at once. So, yeah, and access and integrate hidden, unseen, rejected parts. Sure, I've had to look at some hectic ones. No wonder I rejected them and hid them. And so shadow work becomes a large part of this journey, but it's about integrating the shadow and your light. And I, unfortunately for me, but I've got through it, I did very, very bad shadow work, and it can actually get quite dangerous. I did everything else quite well. I did emotional and mental mastery, feeling my feelings, observing my mind, my thought stuff. I did a lot of that pretty well, I think. But the shadow work I got all wrong because I just didn't know what I didn't know till about a year ago. So, yeah, that is something where we need the right information or guidance, or I've certainly got most of it from books actually or podcasts, so I can point you in that direction. Simone's a bit of a trained in it. Loretta's quite good at it. So yeah, I've got a shadow questionnaire. As you know, I'm not trying to sell it to you, but it just gets you straight down to that stuff you can't see, but only when it feels right. Because at some point we're going to need to be the parent to ourselves that we didn't have, and to integrate, to do work with our inner child, to give ourselves what we never got, um, and start really feeling our feelings, and creating an ability to feel our feelings in a way that they don't wipe us out, because it can get quite scary and even dangerous. And to start observing our minds and creating mental mastery. That's where I started 9 years ago. I started with the mental stuff. I did do other stuff, but honestly, when I started watching my mind, I had no idea how much was firing off in my head and how freaking hectic it was. It took me ages just to be able to see myself thinking. But anyway, and then, I mean, there's a whole other aspects to this, but we're not going to go into much more than this now. But energy is an important part of it. Energy retrieval from the past, energy retrieval from trauma, energy retrieval even maybe from past lives, clearing energies, inside on us and outside of us. Loretta does quite a lot of this work, but we're not going to go any further with that right now. And we cannot bypass the body. That's the thing. We can do a lot of mind work and spiritual work and shadow work, which is a lot. Often I do too much in my head. But actually, the body is the starting place, because the body will bring us home to the truth over and over again of what actually is going on unconsciously. The body can't be left out of this, and I keep on forgetting that. Maybe that's why I keep on getting sick. Yeah. So I just went a tiny bit more into shadow, inner child, and just a little bit. This is very surface, skimming over everything. So this is just the part of ourself that carries the wounds from the past, as most of you probably know. But it's a part of our mind, actually, that's storing these emotional experiences and unmet needs and suppressed emotions. And it's a lens through which we experience our current lives. And this wounded part of ourselves contributes to the reactions and the choices we make. It doesn't mean it's bad, it's just the way it is, and it actually just wants to be seen and heard. So it is a part of us, but it's not really us, but it feels like us. And Simone, excuse me for being so superficial with this, because I know you're an expert, but yeah. And the ego, I think it's really important to understand that the ego is the protector of the inner child. So it's not, sometimes I think I just want to evilize my ego all the time because it does some really hectic stuff. But I've had some pretty hectic past experiences, and those memories have been stored in my brain. So I now have empathy that my ego is trying to protect me, even when it seems often that it's doing the opposite because it's trying to keep me safe and loved. And we've done a whole episode on this, and we can refer you to more information if you want. But actually, safety for our brain and our ego is about familiarity. So those patterns we learned as children by the age of 7 to get some kind of love or to protect ourselves, yeah, that's what feels familiar to us.
Mm.
Oh, I love these images because, yeah, this has been such a profound part of my recent journey. And thank you, Simone, for bringing IFS to me. It has been quite helpful. But yeah, it's those parts of ourselves, the aspects that, oh God, and some of mine have been so hard to look at because honestly, I would label them as ugly. But Simone and Marcia, who was on our group in the beginning, and people who are deeply embedded in this work will tell you that those parts that some of mine they are rough. They get very angry, some of them. They're brutal, actually. I didn't realize how brutal I was on my own inner child towards myself, how I talk. And I was so upset about that. When I was doing my shadow work badly, the main mistake I made is my shadow stuff came up and I started seeing myself and what was really running my program. And I couldn't stop this habitual looping in my head of going, oh, what? And I was self-criticizing and berating, and then I couldn't get out of that. And then these feeder energies feed on it. And then, and I mean, I've been doing years and years of work, but my energy, I don't know, my energies all went out of kilter. And I had to get very sick to the point of death again last year to actually go, no, something has to change here. So I started working on many different levels, starting with my energetic stuff, many different types of energy bodies and energy attachments, and going to deeper unconscious stuff. And to start doing proper shadow work. And then I realized, and only last week, Master said to me, Antoinette, that you've got two parts of yourself that are speaking to each other. And look how that part speaking to this part. I was going, but this saboteur, and then the inner child does this. And then she's like, your rage just wants to be heard. That part of you which is so unacceptable to you, and you're almost demonizing it. It wants you to listen to it and hear it. So it's been quite interesting. I don't think for many people don't have to go on such an extreme journey as me, but I don't know. But so some of the things I really didn't know until I really, really knew them recently, from a couple of really good teachers out there, this is not about creating positive affirmations to get out of the negative. All of that is part of what I still do. But it's actually about integration. It's about integrating all the different parts of ourselves. It's about integrating our cuck or whatever with our divine light, which sometimes we can't even see. It's about finding the gold in the shadow. It's about recalibrating, reclaiming, and I put revelation there because it's a beautiful word that's come my way as a form of understanding for me. I do get revelations from the higher side or whatever, quite a lot these days. I think a lot of us are. But also the stuff coming up from my unconscious and revealing itself, even if it's my punishing inner part, is a revelation. And I'm welcoming it as that. And I wrote regulation there because if we're not regulated, it's very hard to do this work. It takes stamina, it takes commitment, and it takes a certain kind of energy. So, I mean, the basic regulation, we might do a whole section on this, is sleep and exercise and eating properly. And they're very, very basic things. and nervous system regulation, but that's not always what we think it is.
Mm.
So we're going to talk about regulation quite a lot, and it's the Alexander technique is a very good way to very simply just regulate, because regulation means body, mind, and spirit. It's not just the food or the So Loretta's nodding, and it's about meeting, not splitting from or dissociating. That's something Xavier Dugbars really helped me with. Because I wasn't dissociating or anything anymore, but I was struggling to meet those parts of myself, and listen to them and integrate them. And for me, I didn't realize how important it is to feel safe. I had no idea how unsafe the ego feels when you start doing this very deep work. So I've started to learn. I've learned now how to create safety within myself, which is 100% necessary if you're going to do this work. So we can talk about that. Yeah, and mind, body, and energy has to be balanced, but there's other ways we can create safety as well. And we definitely need the right help. I can tell you right now, in connection. So I didn't get a lot of professional help, but I got enough. And this kind of, the hub is not the answer to all of it. It's not going to be your coach or but I think it's a space holder for it, and a deep understanding space. And so it's better than having absolutely nothing. And we have some very amazing people on here. And if we're all on this journey together, we support each other and we walk each other home. So before I go into the tool for today, 7 o'clock. Oh, what was I going to say? I forgot now. I'm just going to read something actually that I saw on Xavier Dugbars' site today, and I quote him quite a lot these days because he's really helped me with these things that I've put on the slide. So I read an email of his today. I want to read it to you. Reclaiming our light will not let us get away with not embracing the parts of ourselves we don't yet know how to love or we've been conditioned to reject. The light will not let us get away with not facing our core fears. Our light is a magnifying glass, and before it illuminates the world, it must illuminate us, all of us. Our light puts us face to face with our shadow, and this is where we can get stuck. Even I got stuck there. A bit stuck. I'm clearly unstuck. Well, sort of. Especially if we focus. Well, what's stuck and unstuck? I'm definitely unstuck because I'm riding a very wild horse and a big roller coaster, but I'm not stuck like I was at one stage. So now the thing is okay, the light's going to put us face to face with our shadow, and we can get stuck especially if we focus on strategies that rely on willpower, positive thinking, spiritual transcendence, or just waiting to be ready. Those are the things I think some of us have no idea how, if that's what we're focusing on all the time, they're going to end up tripping us up a bit. Actually, it doesn't mean we don't integrate them in some way. So, so this was this is an overview. Okay, there's an overview and it's a lot, but I wanted to try, and Loretta and I agreed to try and create a context for this whole, it's like a map or a puzzle. And when you start seeing all the pieces coming together, the knowledge that I gained from certain people, especially in the last few years, changed everything for me, just insight. That's why wisdom knowledge is something we're so passionate about. Because if you just know what's going on, you can know what's coming and potentially how to deal with it. Sure. So we're going to dive into some of these things more, and maybe be guided by also what you want to look at, and then maybe offer some stunning explanation. Oh, really? Because sometimes I think one of my my too muchness is a part of me that has such a big strength, and sometimes I just feel like I'm just too bloody much. But anyway, so thank you. I'm too waffly, too blah blah. Anyway, You know, let's go to the tapping, Loretta. This is the little tool we're going to, now we are bringing you different tools all the time. And that's simply because we need a toolbox. We need a toolbox. Besides the wisdom, knowledge, and the map, we need a toolbox of things that really start helping with the integration, actually. So we've talked about the parachute process, which is a very good integrative tool. So is the set A, set B. And I forgot about tapping. When I had cancer, I was trying everything, and I dived into tapping with a lot of cynicism in my mind, going, yeah, what a lot of bullshit. This is all bypassing. But it really freaking works. It's not the cure-all, but it works. So I was recently, because it's been hard for me recently when it's hard, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do today? Because my intuition is honed enough now that I go, what's my next step today? I don't do the same tool every single day anymore because sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm like, what do you want me to do next? And the next thing, I get this message, well, why don't you try that tapping thing again? And that's why Loretta said also we forget. We do these things, they're simple, they're effective, and then we find another tool or another teacher and we're off in some other direction. I'm like, okay, let me try this tapping thing. It's quick and it's easy. So I tried it and it's actually quite effective. So how many of you do not know tapping? Maybe just send me a thumbs up. Or do you all know tapping? Everybody knows about tapping. Okay. So the only proof of the pudding is in trying it. So tapping is based on Chinese medicine and modern psychology, and it's about tapping on the meridian points, which apparently can help release the energetic blockages that can lead to emotional dysregulation or sometimes toxic thoughts. So the interesting thing is we're going to do a tapping just now. I'm going to take you through one. And the interesting thing when you tap, Loretta, I think you can change the slide, is, for trauma. Oh, look at that. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes. And we forget, sometimes I think our minds tell us the more difficult things, the hard things, are the things that are going to work. And this journey is not always easy, but some of the tools are so simple. So thanks for sharing that. It really helped me then, and I must say I'm finding it quite effective now. So it's very interesting to identify a problem or an issue. So it can be a trauma, and Robin probably knows more about this than me, an emotional issue, a thought process that's looping, and just find a word to represent that. Like tonight, I thought we might do fear, but if there's some other overriding emotion or thought process you'd like to work on, we can also do that rather. And then rate it from 0 to 10. Like when I practiced this fear one today, I was feeling fear is one of my constant companions, and mostly I can work with it. But today it was just hovering there. And so I did the fear tapping to practice for tonight. And I'd say I was about a 6.5 when I started. And when I stopped tapping, I was probably about a 2. So yeah, once again, it's not a cure-all, but it really does seem to regulate and integrate. So those are the tapping points in case you've forgotten them or somebody doesn't know them. Robin, maybe you want to take us through a tapping process. Otherwise, I'm going to do one. I love Brad Yates tapping. I don't know, Robin, who other people that tap and know tapping well can recommend other people's YouTube channels and stuff. But Brad Yates, for me, I've been tapping Brad Yates. Well, I tapped it for years. Everything from miracles. He's got 1,800 clips, and I'm using his stuff again. He does it for me